So now we've seen some of the basic power of React and what it's able to do. We're going to keep looking at some more of this stuff, and specifically in this video, you do not have to code along for this because hopefully you don't ever have to write any of this. But you should understand a little bit of it, and you should know what it does, so that then when we move over to functional components, then you'll say, aha, I'm familiar with this. This makes a lot more sense to me. And if you ever get a job where you're changing legacy code over into newer code, again, this is where being able to write in classes and object and prototypes and things like that in JavaScript comes in really useful. So we're going to go back to some of that stuff, nasty how it is, and be able to turn around and kind of change some of that stuff over into newer React code. So what we'll do, we're going to create a class, and actually we're going to create a component. So first thing we're going to do, let's go ahead and, it's kind of a chicken and the egg question, but we're going to start out and we're going to create the class. We're going to say class text area counter extends react dot component. And so this is going to actually create a component class. And again, if you're familiar with object-oriented programming, you remember that we have inheritance. And so this text area counter is going to inherit all of the attributes of a React component. So all of the qualities that a component has are going to automatically be passed down into this. And so all that we're going to have for right now is we're going to use our constructor function, which is, again, how we build the app itself. And we're going to say that this dot state equals empty parentheses, and we're going to set this up automatically. This dot on text change equals this dot on text change dot bind, and we're going to do this. Now, again, you do not have to actually understand a lot of what's going on here. The reason that I'm doing this basically is, let's see, yeah. So you got that. The reason I'm doing this is, again, so that we can see some of the examples of this. If you want to get more into it, there's YouTube videos on object-oriented JavaScript and object-oriented React. I teach object-oriented JavaScript. I think it's honestly not a very good idea the way that it's implemented, but that's fine. And there are people who use it, so here we are teaching it. But it is increasingly unpopular to use object-oriented JavaScript and React, and that's part of why I'm explaining this to you, saying this is what it is, but the world seems to be heading very strongly towards functional React, and that's really what I want us to focus on and get out of this. So we've got the constructor function here, and this will just kind of set up some defaults, some stuff that we need up at the beginning. We also need to use super, because this is going to actually, the super line right here is going to actually take all of this stuff and utilize it and instantiate it, right? Great. And then from here, we've got a whole bunch of other stuff kind of in the middle. I'm going to skip along to the end, to the render function, which is where the class-based component actually generates some stuff. It actually makes things that are observable by our window. So we're going to say render, and we're going to say const text equals text in this dot state, and so this, what we're going to do here, this is ternary operators. You find these more and more in let's see, what's the rest of that line? We'll see what all this means in a little bit. Let me finish writing this out, and then we can explain and talk about it. I'm going to return we're going to close. Oh, we got one more h3, and we're going to put in here text dot length. I like having spaces between things because it makes it easier to read. And then we're going to close out our div. Let me tab this forward. All right, so what all is going on here? So what it's going to do is, so right now that state is empty, and that's okay. And we're going to have one more function we're going to have to actually add here. I apologize before this is operational. But then we're going to be able to check stuff out. So essentially what we're doing here is we've got this JSX, this is a JSX section, is going to be taking some text, and text is going to be set to whatever the string is in this dot state, if it exists, right? Because if state has some text in it, then we're going to return that and save it to the text variable. Otherwise, we're going to take this dot props dot text. You might be wondering, where on earth do we pass in props? And that is a great question, and not one we're going to get into too much detail on here. But essentially, we're gonna have default props in just a second. We'll look at that. So again, this is still just kind of a half of a thing. But constructor makes the thing and has stuff that we can talk to. We have not set this function yet either, so nothing's going to happen. But essentially, we've got a text area, and when our user types in the text area, we want to save that text to our state, and then that state is going to change. We're going to bind the change to our object as it's changing, and then we'll be able to see how long that text is actively from our H3. How would we get this to work in here? Because so far this is not called, right? We've created a class, and you'll remember the class is like a blueprint of an idea. It's not the actual thing yet. And we have to actually create the thing someplace. And so rather than all of this stuff, which we're not really concerned about, we're going to put in text area counter and close it off. And so in theory, we should be able to, we're going to have some issues with this probably. With the on text change, but that's okay. We're gonna see if it works first. It probably won't. Nope, sure didn't. Great. So we're gonna keep working on this, and then we're gonna go back over it again in just a moment. So let's create that on text change function. We're gonna do that up here. And keep in mind that the tabs don't really matter here, but it does really help clarify and help you remember what's going on. So we say on text change, and we're gonna take an event here. Because it's on and on change. So again, when you have on click, on change, on mouse over, on button push, on a variety of things in JavaScript, when events occur, there is an event object that we will want to receive. And in this case, we do want that received because we're going to end up using it to set state. So this dot set state. Again, your head probably should be spinning. If it's not spinning, congratulations, you're smarter than I am. And that should be the end of that. So here's what, so this is an object that we are setting to the state. So again, our state is defaulted to an empty object. On text change, we're going to, this thing it's a very odd word in JavaScript. It's a huge pain and a really complicated part of learning object-oriented programming. So again, what I want you to do is think about what does each function basically do. So our constructor makes the thing, gets it ready to be interacted with. Our on text change takes text and saves it to state. Again, so the set state thing, again, in our last video, we looked at the use state deal. It's the same kind of process. We're creating reactive data that keeps tracked while we're making the thing. And so if the text changes, then set state will save it to here, and we can access it like this. So the dot text, this text is now a key inside of our state, right? And then we're going to save that to, again, this is text here. We could have called this whatever we wanted to. But this text is going to be here. And actually, we should probably just get rid of this for the time being. We'll come back to this. In this dot state dot text. And that should actually be fine because we don't have any default values. Still nothing. That's fine. All right. And we need to, man, what a weird way to write code. Did I do this right? That looks fine to me. That looks fine. That looks fine. Let's set this to default. Let's see if that will operate. Where are you, Med? Oh, it's because it's an object. We'll do text default. That should play out. this will work. Let's just go ahead and finish this. We're just gonna do the whole thing. And so our set state is done, constructor is done, on text change is done, render is done. Let's give it some default props. So again, in here earlier, what we had was oh, actually this might work too, rather than the text attribute specifically. Try one more thing. One more thing. There we go. Huzzah. All right. So there is, in fact, state. There is actually data here. And so this is going to say whether or not there's anything in the state. We get either true or false. So right now this is getting set to true. And we're going to finish this. And we're going to say if there is state, then we want to set it to this.state.text. Great. Otherwise, we're going to set it to oops. Right? And so we can go back here and refresh, and it says default, and the length of that is 7. As we're changing this, we are getting this number to change. Huzzah! Okay, so great. So let's, and if we get rid of all of this, actually, we can get rid of this too. This should actually result in it saying oops. And it's still good. It's still reactive. Great. So this is kind of cool. And all that we've done here is default this to oops if nothing's in here. And right now there's nothing in here when we run the page, so it's going to default to oops. And again, this the text length is going to be right there. And yeah, cool. So and it's going to take this thing, which is oops right now, default it, and we get the length back. What's going to happen after this is, and again, all of the this is everywhere. It's such a mess. This is part of why people are moving away from this. It's really, really hard to learn initially. So if you're not completely tracking with this by the end of this video, that's fine. I repeat, it's okay. I just wanted to show you some of how scary this can be. And then from here, we're going to talk about a little bit more like, oh, wow, this actually gets a lot better than it used to be. And you will actually start to like things like functional React. So the last thing we want to do is we're going to say text area counter dot default props. And this is a React thing. It's because text area counter is an object, so we're actually pulling this default props attribute from the React.component. That's something that comes from there. And you've got an object, and we're just going to say text is going to be equal to count me as I type. Super duper. So now instead of oops, what we're going to do is we're going to this, which is again the whole object. This is talking about this entire thing. We're going to go from this dot props dot text. And so now there is actually a default property text, a props text right there. We're passing in as default props. We're going to pass it in. And we're going to say, if there's state, if there's anything here, which right now there's not. So if there is state, then use the text that's there. Otherwise, use this .props.text, which we're passing in right here. So this should, when we refresh the page, say count me as I type, and we get the number 19 because that's how many characters are there. So that's a little bit more maybe nice and ornate version of that. But we have this this prop here, so we can actually call it multiple times. Text area counter, and that would work. However, actually that might work. It's by itself. Again, I don't usually write React this way. No, it won't work. So it's going to actually need to be. This is a bad idea. And again, we don't write React this way anyway, so it doesn't matter if it doesn't work. That's part of why I'm having bugs, is because I don't usually use it this way. I'm doing it strictly educationally. But anyway, so we've got this. One other thing, and the real reason why I wanted to show you this way of writing this application, which is working, by the way, thank you. The real reason I wanted to do this was to show you our life cycle methods. And I'm actually going to use someone else's documentation rather than React. Oh no, I'm going to use React's. Let's see, it should be in my front end folder. Coding. Nope. Course references. Data. Not data. This is not data. This is front end course. Here we go. Huzzah! All right. Cool map, Brandon. This means nothing to us. That's fine. So what we need to see here is and this is part of why I used this specific way of going about this problem. we have each component has a variety of things that it does as it exists. And I am actually going to go to the view docs. Hooray. So when we're using front-end frameworks, whether it's React, whether it's Angular, whether it's Vue, it doesn't really matter what it is, but what we're going to see here is each component, there's a time where the browser first comes across it in the first place, right? It says, oh, hello, component. Who are you and what are you, right? What are some things that I need to know about you, okay? And so we're going to use, again, these are different tools. I want you to see just kind of the lines here. But we have something that, the renderer, the thing that takes things from code and puts them on your screen, it encounters the component, okay? And it says, okay, great, well, what are you exactly? And in React, that's where the constructor function will actually execute, okay? Yeah, so you pass the props into your constructor. But the constructor is like, hey, I'm using class-based React, and this is all the stuff that you need to know in order to initially even just kind of handle the existence of this component, right? So the constructor is like the very first thing that it needs to know about, right? After it's been constructed, then it's going to render, okay? So you got this first thing that says, hey, and keep in mind that, we'll look at that in a second. We're just going to focus on mounting first. Okay, so the first thing that happens is it says, hey, what information do you need to be made, right? We have to instantiate the class. It goes from the idea of the thing to becoming a thing. Then once it's become the thing, it has to actually get rendered, right? So we say, this is what you are. What does that look? We're going to actually go through the process of putting you on the actual page. That's the render portion. And you'll notice that and same thing, we've got the constructor here. And we move down, we've got the render, right? This is the part where it takes all of our logic and all of the pieces that make it what it is and put it into JSX or HTML, right? And move from this, what are the pieces that are you, into, let's put you into something. And that's where that happens right here, is in the render part of our code. But there's other things that we can add in here. So React will update the DOM and refs. Part of that is if it's getting updated with set state, then it's going to rerun the render function and change the way that it renders, change the way it looks. And we're seeing that in our React app, right? We've got this here, and as I'm typing this thing, it's re-rendering this for us. It's taking that data, processing it, and changing the way that our web page looks. It's changing what's called the UI, the user interface here. And that's pretty cool. So it's doing that kind of as it goes. That set state function is getting called right here as our text's value changes. Neat. And then after that, there's these components. There's component did mount, which is what happens after it gets like updated, basically, right? So after it happens, it's invoked immediately after a component is mounted or inserted into the tree, right? So after the DOM is aware of that thing existing, okay? Now there's actually functions we can use to target these different processes. So the mount is just the initial mount is when that one shows up. The component did update is any time that set state or force update or new props change the way that the UI looks, right? So component did mount happens right away. Component did update happens as it updates. And then we can also remove it down the road, which we're not going to end up doing here because we're not like deleting our stuff. But there are times where you might want to close out of a modal or hide comments or things like that, and the component will unmount at that point. And the reason that we want it to unmount is that we don't have data leaks, we don't have memory leaks. We want to make sure that the DOM doesn't like keep track of everything forever, because that's part of how things like Google Chrome end up being RAM hogs. Is if you don't develop the website well, then it's going to just like hold on to everything forever. At least until we leave the website. But component will unmount helps React like you say, hey, we're not concerned about this component anymore. We don't care. It's gone. So that's some of what's going on. There are some other things going on here. We're not going to get too concerned about should component update or get snapshot. But again, these are just different ways. You can think about it as like a flow chart with these lifecycle methods where you could target different stuff and do different things. So that's kind of our map there. If you want to see the Vue version, if that helps you make more sense, right? Initial render, then it gets compiled and gets made. It actually, so that's before the render. Then it gets rendered and then it's mounted. Once it's mounted, you can update as many times as you want to, and then ultimately you can unmount. Same concept for both of them. They just go about it in different ways. If you're with me for my Vue course, my front end course, you'll be taking Vue after this. And so there's that. So anyways, so now we've got all that stuff. We're gonna come back here. We're gonna actually write some of these. So the first one we're going to write is a component did mount function. Component did mount. It doesn't take any arguments. We're just gonna do some console.logs here. We just want to see when the things are happening. Component mounted. And so this is gonna happen as soon as we actually create the component. So we're gonna come back over here, and we're gonna inspect. Go to our console, and nothing's happening right now. I need to refresh the page. And it says component mounted, right? So that just says, hey, the component exists, right? Here we are. Now there is, in fact, a component. So this is just a lifecycle method. This is just something that targets how the things come on and off of the DOM, and that's what this function is going to do. So the next one we're going to do is component will unmount. And this one should occur. If we go back here, right there. And this one shouldn't end up, I don't think we'll ever end up actually seeing this. Console.log component unmounted. And so that would happen if we ever deleted the thing. We're not going to delete the thing, so that probably will never actually run. But you should be aware that that function does exist. We got 3 more here. We've got component did update. And this does take some arguments. It's going to take our previous props. It's going to take previous state and a snapshot. I'm not going to get too concerned about what any of those mean at this point in time. But we're going to console.log component updated. We're going to then add prev props, prev state, and snapshot. And the reason I'm not going to get into too much detail with these is these things are kind of magic in the background, things that React does. And since I have no intention of you ever writing this kind of code, at least for this course, I'm not going to get into too much detail as to what's going on under the hood. What you do need to know is that these components are not written, these functions are not written by us, right? These methods are written by React for React. And so the things that are getting passed into are going to be pretty much automatic. Please also keep in mind that this function, this component did update, applies to this class. So if I have like 5 or 6 classes down here, each one of them would need its own component did update or will unmount, etc. if you want to do things with them. Otherwise, there's nothing wrong with leaving these out. Obviously, we saw that previously our code worked fine, even though we didn't make these. These would be used to add side effects, or let's say that you create something that's, like let's say we had a component that did this text.length, right? This was its own component that checked that value, which would be really hard to do since we've taken that value and hidden it inside of this component. Again, this can get very messy very quickly. But we have another component. Before this component can load, it needs to check and see how long is the value inside of text area counter, right? And so we would use some of these methods to say, hey, go and ask that other function, or that other class, I guess, goodness gracious, that other class, ask it how long its text is, and then we'll render, right? I need to ask for something at somebody else's thing before I render. And that's called a side effect. And so we would be able to put that in the, before the thing actually mounts, which is really nifty. So anyways, that's cool. 2 more of these. We've got before update and should component update. Actually, I'm not going to get into those ones too much. I just want to see what happens after it did update. But you can actually target to for things to happen before it updates, and you can also say should it update, because otherwise sometimes you only want the component to re-render if it's gotten new information or something's changed. And the plus side of this is if something hasn't changed, you don't want to re-render other things that are depending on it, right? So if this one, so let's say you have component A and it re-renders and component B is dependent on component A, we can say, did anything that I actually need from component A change, right? And before I update, I'm going to check, should I update? And then if that's false, then it's not going to re-render, it's not going to update, okay? But what I want you to know is class-based stuff can be dense, it can be very difficult, and there's these lifecycle methods, and we didn't touch any of these kinds of things in our in our previous application. And actually, one of the things that I'm going to have everybody watch is Dan Abramov, who's one of the head honchos who actually makes React, one of the developers at Meta that actually builds this stuff. And he actually has a presentation, a conference talk on what the old React is, because this is kind of an older style of React. And when they introduce hooks and functional React to kind of compare and contrast the two. So that is pretty much what we have here. Now that we've gotten these things here, let's go ahead and refresh the page over here. And I should be able to, as I'm typing this, oh, we've got a problem. Add an error boundary, prev props not defined. I might actually need to do something else. How did I do this last time? Said I don't teach, or I don't code this way in my spare time. We're gonna add those other two components then. Just gonna see if that fixes our problem. I'm gonna press enter here, paste those in. This does not need to be tabbed forward. I'm not sure why VS Code does that. But so we've got component before update. It takes previous props and previous state and logs that out. And then if it should update or not, we got the new props and new state and returns true. So let's try this again, see if it works. And please no red text. We got red text anyways. Why are we still getting red text? This works on my other version of this, so I don't see why it would not work here. Super reactive state, this on this on set state, event target value. Did I spell something wrong? Component did update. That's all lowercase first letters. Let me just like copy paste this, see if anything's different. Actually, get rid of that. Put this one in instead. Refresh the page again, see if it works. Okay, apparently I typed something wrong, so I'm really curious now what I did. The only thing I can think of is that I had different stuff in here and that actually mattered. I didn't think it mattered, but maybe it did. But go ahead and just copy this down. And like I said, I don't use these lifecycle methods. Hooks in newer version of React take care of this. And so again, I just wanted you to be aware that this exists, and this is part of the thing that hooks, again, all the headaches that we're having right now, these are things that React hooks and functional programming are really truly meant to fix. They are meant to avoid these issues and to make things better. So that's part of why we're doing this. We're gonna head back over here now, refresh the page, and you'll notice that as I'm typing here, I can get rid of the whole thing, and you'll notice that there's tons of stuff getting logged out here, and we can see where it's coming from. Should component update, and we're getting this text object back, and basically it's returning true, so it's logging it, and that's going to be usable. We can call this someplace else and return true, and that will tell other components whether or not they're supposed to execute. You can see that it is collecting what I am writing as I'm going. And that each time I'm doing it, it is updating and asking, should it update? And then yes, it does. And so then it does, in fact, update. And obviously we've got the counter there. So that is class-based React. And it's a pain, and that's part of why I wanted to show it to you, so that the next thing I show you, you say, aha, wow, what a breath of fresh air. This makes so much more sense. This is so much cleaner. And a much more pleasant experience all around. And so, and again, you might end up having to work with some of this stuff. Again, older React code does use this type of thing, and I wanted you to be aware of that. But for your personal projects, and if you're gonna do your own dev work for fun, pick tools that you like, pick tools that make sense for you and that you can be good at. And I think I gotta say the learning curve for functional React is a whole lot easier than this, but you needed to know that it existed and just have some awareness so that you're not totally blind when you come across this stuff out in the wild. All right, cool. So that's been class-based React. I'll see you in the next lecture for functional React.